Let's speak to Patsy Widakuswara, White House Bureau Chief for Voice of America. Patsy, hello, welcome to the program.
My pleasure to be here.
Excellent. And now your colleague, Alsu Kumasheva, was amongst those released alongside Evan Gershkovich and Vladimir Kara-Murza. And you've been at the White House to hear President Biden speak about this historic release. What was that like?
Oh, it was obviously amazing for all the journalists in the room, as well as those who have particular connections, our colleagues from the Wall Street Journal, and of course, as you mentioned, also Alsu Kumasheva. And just overall, this was a really historic moment. All the family was there, as well as the children of Alsu Kumasheva. They have two girls. So her husband was there, and then the two girls were there, I believe 16 and 13, or turning 13 years old tomorrow, Miriam Butorin. And President Biden told the press to sing happy birthday to Miriam, which, at that age, 13 years old, I don't know how much she enjoyed the attention, but it was a really touching moment.
Yeah, that's right. And one of our listeners was asking why was President Biden singing happy birthday. Now we know. Let's pivot to Donald Trump's comments last night at the National Association of Black Journalists convention. There's been a very strong reaction, including from Republicans, about his attempt to question Kamala Harris's racial identity, and that was during a heated exchange with the moderator. He wanted to present himself as a friend of the black community. Let's take a listen.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman.
I respect
she went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't.
Well, Patsy, how has that gone down? I mean, I could hear the gas and the chuckles in the room, but what about outside the room?
So this was a couple of things. Number one, I think President Trump, I covered the Trump administration, and as I recall, he has never been good in a situation where the focus of attention is not on him. So he has been complaining, as I hear from people close to his campaign, he's been complaining about the fact of Kamala Harris being suddenly very popular among Democrats. She's increasingly polling positive while he's increasingly polling down. So in terms of the reaction or the intended consequence of this statement, I think he wasn't speaking to the audience in the room. He was not trying to reach out to more black voters. Clearly this is a room full of black journalists, and he probably knows exactly how this will land, this kind of very outrageous, very bombastic comment. But he's speaking to his base, and his base would either agree with him or forgive him, in the sense that they would just see this as part of the classic Trump showmanship. So I think that's the reasoning behind why he's saying those things. And of course, now people, instead of talking about Kamala Harris and how exciting and how enthused are Democrats about her, now they're talking about Donald Trump and the outrageous statements that's coming out of his mouth. And he has successfully brought back the attention to him. And I think for Donald Trump, whatever kind of attention, as far as the track record shows, he really wants it, even though that kind of attention may not always be positive.
Yeah, I understand, Patsy, there was a lot of division within the black journalist community. And the NABJ event, the National Association of Black Journalists, is one I've not quite managed to go to, but I've heard a lot about it. And previous presidents or contenders have spoken to it. And last time, Donald Trump got the support of 13% of African-American men, whereas black women were much more solidly behind the Democrats. How would you assess the level of support for Trump in the black community now, and the support for Harris?
Well, clearly the majority of African-American support traditionally goes to Democratic candidates, and particularly with Harris at this point, we see that she's really increasing in terms of poll numbers. But there is this segment of African-American voters that Donald Trump might be eyeing, which is, these kind of like young black voters, usually male, who could be swing voters, he could peel off a few percentage point. These are perhaps voters who respond well to his kind of projection of machismo, his narrative about how under his administration, Blacks and other minorities have improved their social and economic standing. So there's a slice of that Black population that still up for grabs for Trump.
And how true was that, Patsy? This sense that I have done more for the African Americans than any president since Abraham Lincoln. That's what Trump is pitching. He pitches himself almost as a black guy, saying, I've been harassed just like you were in the Deep South. His supporters have said he's been lynched just like by the administration, by the justice system, just as African Americans were during the period of Jim Crow. I've been shot at, so I know how you feel. It's extraordinary. But is any of that breaking through? Is any of that succeeding?
I think the people who are going to support Trump, they will not be swayed by anything that he says. So, at this point, there's already a very fixed camp of those who support Donald Trump and those who do not support him. And those kind of comments that you mentioned in terms of, his approach towards minorities would seem odd to the rest of the American electorate. Why would you approach a demographic in a way that could be considered racially offensive? There's a whole litany of race baiting offenses that the moderator at the NABJ, Rachel Scott of ABC News, read to Donald Trump, and those are real things that actually happen, and these things are something that's quite hurtful to a lot of Black journalists as well as the Black community overall. But again, there is still that slice that Trump is aiming for, yet his bigger audience, his targeted audience, is his base.
Yeah. And what about other minorities within the states? Maybe Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, Indonesian Americans, a community that you may know fairly well. What is their approach to Trump when he attacks or belittles a particular community? Is there a sense that, well, that could be us too? Or, hey, he's not talking about us?
So I would start with saying that any kind of minority group is not a monolithic group, right? I mean, even with any community, there's always more liberal folks and more conservative people. And, we vote with different reasons. For some people, it's a single issue, for example, abortion or immigration. And that goes across demographic lines. These issues may be important for certain people. So it's difficult to brush with to generalize this. But if you look at the polling, obviously the support that Trump enjoys mostly come from white, male, and then, non-college educated, much more so than minorities and the rest.
All right. Patsy Widakuswara, White House Bureau Chief for Voice of America, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to shorten your WhatsApp down, Dominic, because I'm pressed for time. He says, a pluribus unum. It's a great motto for the United States. Out of many, one. Trump doesn't seem to be able to grasp that Kamala Harris can have South Asian heritage and be black. In fact, she's living the American dream. A kid from Oakland with an African father and an Asian mother. Actually, let me read the whole of it out. Who's grown up to be a heartbeat away from becoming America's president. Go, girl, go. Keep the dream alive. And Trump, he says.